A cart groans through rutted mud, while dusk pins a purple bruise across the fields. The wheels sigh in the ancient grooves of the lane. Each revolution remembers rain in the horseshy nights, in the slow calendar of harvest and levee. The horses breathe steam into the cooling air, their flanks white with vapor, their harnesses smelling of tar and oil, in the faint sweetness of newly hoed roots pressed into the nostrils of the world. An archer rides beside the cart with his arm slack at his side, an arrowhead still cool beneath the fold of his jerkin, as if the metal itself prefers silence now. His cloak is rubbed thin where the bough once lay, his fingers bear black scars of rope burn, each black line a ledger of sieges kept on skin. The wheels whisper old roots between village, abbey, and the Lord's hall, and in that knowing is the slow philosophy of those who have learned to live between duty and survival. He remembers the siege like a map of senses. Pitch spat, like second rain, hissing where it met leather and skin. Iron sang with the heat of red metal, a thin, terrible music. Smoke drew silhouettes into crude statues that stumbled between flame and shadow. Men shouted, and the shouting folded atop itself until it became a single animal note. Hunger for blood, hunger for home. The walls held, and then, sometimes, they did not. The tools of assault and defense, scaling ladders, battering rams, engines of physics and patience, were the grammar of that age. The sentences that decided whether a family would sleep under the eaves or among the bones of burned barns. When he speaks of those days, his voice is small, as if ashamed of having once been so loud on the abbey. The world learned another language. Here, the hand that had loosed arrows became patient with linen and thread, where rope had bound men. In the name of war, the same hemp now dried sheets and held up lines of herbs to the light. The infirmary's beds smelled not only of sweat and fever, but of wine used with cloth, a bitter antiseptic wash, and of poultices warmed and spread like a soft benediction. Sisters moved between pallets with a liturgical steadiness, rosemary tucked into bandages, comfrey mashed into resolute slurries, and the names of plants spoken like prayer. Their herb beds were arranged in ordered beds, a small cosmos cultivated against suffering. What had once been lore was now daily work, and the work itself was worship. When he lies awake in the barracks of the abbey, he can still feel the cool smear of poultice along his shoulder, the sting of nettle used to draw out rot, and the steadiness of a sister's thumb pressing the dressing down dot memory gives him both. Theater and want, a lord's table, where venison steamed in a pan and fingers stained with spice, and the iron gray of a trench, where common men gnawed at roots and stale bread. Bread was more than food. It was rank, station, and mercy wrapped in crust. A lord's board could feed an appetite into oblivion, meats, salted and sugared, meant to show dominion as much as to fill, while the peasant's loaf was the arithmetic of survival, barley or rye pressed, dense, and honest, sometimes leavened into a whisper of air when luck and grain permitted. That difference settles into memory, the way weather settles into stone. It changes nothing of the hunger, but alters the shape of hope. He learns, slowly, how to braid anger into patient labor. Fingers that once gripped a bowstring learned the small, exacting economy of planting and pruning. Kay finds a place near the infirmary where the monastery keeps a bed of rosemary. Kay kneels on packed earth and feels roots take hold beneath his nails. Ropes that once cinched prisoners now hang to dry linen. The smell of tar on a harness becomes the smell of bread baking at dawn. Small mercies accrete into a life. The warming of a loaf for a child whose mother dyes cloth by lantern light. A careful mending of a soldier's boot. The folding of bandage until it feels like an offering. And that giving away a fresh loaf pressed into small, trembling hands. A covenant is struck. He gives what he can, and, in the giving, learns that survival is a fabric woven of little stitches. Tear will not vanish, okay, but the stitch makes the tear usable, wearable, less dangerous. There are nights when the past pulls as a cold tide. Sometimes the smell of wood smoke will knot his throat. Sometimes a laugh in the hall will unpeg a memory and send it skittering among the bowls. He dreams, too, of language changing around him, curses in the old tongue shared among comrades, like weapons, Latin prayers mouthed by an abbess, as if to order the world itself, and the quiet barter of remedies between sister and patient. The choir's chant becomes a metronome for his recovery, the cadence by which his pulse relearns its place. He watches the sisters stitch names and herbs into bandages, hears them read the ledger of cures, and recognizes that healing is not merely the absence of wounds, but the ritual of remembering. Each plant named, each stitch counted, is a small anchor thrown into the river of chaos. The textures of this rebuilding are specific and cruelly tender. The sting of nettle, the cool smear of ointment, the thump of a boot on packed earth, the grit of flour under a fingernail. These are the quiet witnesses to a life being put back together. His body keeps tallying, not in papers, but in scars and calluses, a map of lessons learned under duress. He gives away a loaf to a child who will grow to remember him not as soldier, but as bread bringer. The child's teeth sift smoke-sweet crumbs, and the archer's certainty is quietly overturned. In the act of giving, he learns a different economy of power. It is not only what you can take, but what you refuse to keep. There comes a day when he stands at the hedge beside the abbey garden and watches the slow, stubborn green of herbs reach for sky. He strings rope between posts, and where that rope has once bound men, it now supports drying sheets, flags of ordinary gentleness. A woman from the village brings dyed cloth and hums as she works. The song is thin but true, like a reed playing someone else's grief back into something like song. The archer, who once counted arrows as friends and enemies, counts stitches now. He measures the earth by how much it will yield, not by how quickly it can be taken. This patient labor does not erase the past. The ledger of siege remains inked into bone, but it reassigns meaning to the days he has left. Finally, as night comes on and torches are lit like small constellations, he walks back toward the cart. The child who ate his loaf runs to the lane and throws a handful of clotted cream and crust into his palms. Small, raw, immediate gratitude. He feels the warmth of the moment settle in his chest like a pebble in a stream, and for the first time since the siege, he believes in a future that is not only a list of things to survive. The cart creaks, the horses shift, and the abbey bell rings once a slow, hollow sound that asks a question rather than giving an answer. He looks to the road ahead, where the path darkens and the Lord's hall waits like an old demand. Kay wraps his cloak tighter, not against cold, but against memory. It's great store the next work of living, to feed, to mend, to remember, and in that continuing, is to find what remains of honor when no one counts spoils any longer. A single toll from the abbey bell lingers in the dusk like a question unanswered, carrying him into the hush of twilight. He rides beside the cart once more, but now it seems less a conveyance for burden and more a vessel for hope unclaimed. The road yawns ahead, through fields darkening, under memories way-tanned yet. Somewhere between the soft rhythm of hooves and the echo of the bell, a faint intention begins to grow. It's delicate as a sprout amid ash. The air tastes of smoke and cooling earth. Wheat stubble crackles beneath the wheels. Stars stud the early sky, pale as the scars on his fingers. Behind him lie the lessons of the forge and the flinching knife of warfare. Ahead unfolds a quiet reckoning. He holds in his chest a new currency compassion, thrice over, and he thinks of the child's edge of night smile, the clasp of tiny hand on his own, and recognizes that rebellion can be built not only in rallying cries, but in the hush and giving of ordinary moments. Somewhere on this road, a whisper is awakened. The women at the abbey spoke quietly of gathering seed barley, rye, dill, coriander, small things to sow in hidden beds, so that if harvest comes, there may yet be bread. These seeds are not just grain. They are ideas dressed in husk, ready to be planted. A rebellion without sword, but with roots. The memory of those flattened kernels. He slows his pace, feeling their promise in his pocket, like pittance or prayer. In the hush between horse breath and the cart's sigh, he recalls the way the sisters spoke the names of plants. Rosemary for remembrance, lavender for peace, rue for healing and courage. Each name was a stitch in the tapestry of their care, each herb a quiet oath. He can almost smell the pungent promise of time under rain-wet soil. And he understands, suddenly, that his survival is tied not only to the bread he gives, but to the ground in which he plants hope. Night settles around them, deepening neither with threat nor reprieve, but with possibility. Ha! He dismounts at a crossroads where moonlight slants hard against stone. Aha! He digs a small hole by lantern light and tucks seeds into dark. Not many, just enough to remember what it means to start. He covers them gently, as if his fingertips were midwives to a sleeping future. Snow, rain, plague, or war might strike again, but so long as this grain sleeps in the earth, a word unspoken may yet be spoken. In that silent act, he finds himself no longer just the archer, no longer just the patient healer. He is now keeper of something simple and great, the promise of return. He stands, brushing soil from his hands. The lantern's glow makes little shadows tremble around him, shadows like seedlings, ready to reach for light. Behind him, faint laughter rises from the cart's hearthfire. The driver, a woman wide-eyed with quiet defiance, hums a tune older than the siege, one for sowing and rising. He follows the hum with his ears, his heart letting the melody coil gently around the memory of loss and the shape of what might yet be. He lifts his eyes to the road, still stretching away from the abbey's safe walls, toward villages and fields and the Lord's hall, where power will not yield easily. He knows what story he'll carry into that hall now. Not a story of siege, but of seed. Not a story of blades, but of bloom. The next battle lies not in breaking walls, but in restoring what those walls sought to steal. He lifts his head, breathes in the cold night air, scented with root and faint smoke, and steps forward. The path is long, and unseen hands watch from window and wattle. He walks into that long reach of road with a question soft as moonlight. If hope can hide in kernel and quiet, what might it grow into? And as he moves away from the place of shelter, the lantern swings and the cart creaks, the light flickers. Shadows stretch in, all the while beneath his boots and in the seams of his soul, something green is stirring. A single seed, pressed between rough fingers, and the world shifts. He kneels in a walled garden, where stones ring faint with centuries of footfall, closed by hedges and ancient walls. This hortus conclusus is more than soiled, is sanctuary. A quiet revolt against memory's weight and war's insistence. In this sacred space, the ground smells of dark loam warmed by the midday sun, of time crushed under knuckle, and of lavender trembling on the edge of bloom. The hush is so deep that he hears the faint scrape of his own breathing around him lie. The ordered beds of the monastery, laid out in precise rectangles, narrow paths crisscrossing like the lines of a ledger, charting prayer and labor. Each bed carries its purpose: fennel and cabbage for the table, onions, garlic, and leeks to chase the cold from bones. Along one path, a physic bed, mint, sage, customary, rue, rosemary too, word in the language of healing, each a solemn token of remembrance and prayer here. The work is liturgy. He remembers reading of the Benedictine rule, of ora et labora prayer, and work braided together in the way manual labor in the garden was itself devotion. He moved slowly, brushing soil from the edge of a raised bed, feeling how each plant embodies both purpose and promise. Roses and lilies nod in symmetry, beauty serving utility in an order older than memory. He tends seedlings in this green geometry, dill, sage, comfrey. The abbey's layout, he recalls, stems from older templates plans like St. Gal's vision of cloistered order in Eden's reflection. Monks and nuns would walk these paths for prayer, for healing, even for solicitude, shading grief. Herbs soothing fever, a rose offering silent confession. He plants another seed. In the faint hum of his breath, it is a promise that what war tried to break can still be shaped by gentleness. He presses a small packet of seed into the earth heirloom grain pressed from village hands, saved from the spoils of last harvest. Seeds have been carried like secrets across generations, shared in kin and cloister alike, passed from hand to hand in hope and necessity. In that act of saving and sowing, he sees rebellion, quiet, rooted, tearing dot in a nearby corner. A fountain murmurs, water trickling through channels the holy echo of the Trinity, the hush of thought, the trail of devotion in stone and flow. A sip from that fountain would cleanse more than dust. It would steady a heart that has known hunger, fear, and the weight of a bowstring. He rises and walks among the beds, touching leaf and petal with reverence. These are the same hands that once drew the bough. Now they trace the contours of rosemary, pronounce the names of plants as if remembering prayer. This is how healing begins, with soil sifting through fingernails, with herb names murmured like spells. Rosemary for remembrance, H for harmony, R for courage, a vocabulary of hope growing where violence once stood. He pauses at the edge of an orchard, where apple and pear trees stand speckled with blossoms, fruit rising toward sky. The dead live again, here not through sword, but through blossom and leaf. Here, in this silent arboretum of renewal, each bud is a question. Could this green surge push back the darkness that once claimed bones? As dusk falls, the scent of flowers and root drifts between archways. Lanterns swing in the cloister, soft halos against stone. He lifts his head to the vaulted sky, where stars edge notes of distant song. The garden sleeps lightly under moonlight, but inside him something wakens up, resolve born of tenderness and soil. He steps back onto the path that will lead him toward village and hall. In his pocket, the seed packet rests heavy, a prayer in. This chapter of living is neither siege nor silence, but sowing, tending, remembering. It is a rebellion in green dot, and as he departs the garden's threshold, the lantern light flickers and stretches across the stones, tracing lines of purpose he will follow into the coming night. The roots have been whispered into being. Now it is time to let them grow. He steps through the cloister's vaulted arcade at dawn, where the lantern's glow has ebbed into the hush of burgeoning light. The garden lies half-awake dew clinging to young shoots, the air heavy with earth that both heals and remembers. This is the Hortus Conclusus, the enclosed garden of silent power. Its walls, a fortress of stone and purpose, a world within walls that stands apart from the world without. It is here that the Virgin Mary herself is invoked in leaf and lomer purity, mirrored in lilies and enclosed fountains. Her peace embodied by the stillness of this sanctuary. He moves through the quadrants, laid out as if in a sacred geometry, one for kitchen roots, another for medicinal herbs, a third for scented flowers, and the final for contemplative blooms. Each bed waits, cradling rosemary, sage, rue, hyssop, cosmary, fennel plants of healing and symbolism, their names whispered as prayers by those who tend them. In these rows, the arch-eternal gardener recognizes the covenant he forged in seed and sweat, that healing is not peace-bandaged stillness, but the patient shaping of small miracles. In the heart of this garden stands a fountain, its waters murmuring as if weaving a liturgy of flow. The bubbling spout, the trickling channel, the silent pool, they speak not only of water, but of the Trinity, of grace in motion, of life springing eternal. He leans over the basin and tilts his head, hearing in that murmur a memory of battle, an up balm, a promise that water and word can both baptize healing into flesh. A sister approaches, hand stained with soil and time. She places a sprig of lavender in his pomade's fragrance, a balm on his calloused fingers. For purity, she says, her voice even and sure. It is neither lesson nor sermon, but a simple truth. This scent carries a memory of the night he lay, broken beneath the assault, and of the mornings he rose again to plant. He traces the contours of these beds with reverence. In the crisp geometry of geometry, he sees the reflection of St. Gal's Vision's 16 beds divided. Distinct, yet part of Holage bed, a stanza in the verse of creation. The act of digging, sowing, pruning becomes liturgy, echoing the Benedictine rhythm of ora et labora, prayer, yes, but also toil, devotion made manifest in soil and leaf. He tends rosemary for remembrance, rue for courage, sage for wellness, and thyme for quiet virtue. Each plant holds both cure and metaphor. Sage, he knows, was once called S. Savatrix sage, the saviorand carried through veil of bones to this enclosure by hands seeking balm and blessing. In its sharp bitterness becomes courage for the weak. Hyssop cleanses both flesh and memory. The garden is not just the abbey's pharmacy, it's a testament, living and breathing, to renewal. Beyond the garden walls, the world persists. War's shadow lingers. Obligations, waiting, teeths, obligations, the Lord's demand. But here, he can silence that weight. Here, he whispers names of plants like benedictions. Sister's gloved hands help him press seed into furrows. Between them passes silent covenant, stronger than any vow sworn beneath the sword's point. He pauses at an orchard where blossoms nod at sky. Fruit trees stand in ordered quiet. Here is resurrection given form, life springing from root and branch, a cycle both simple and profound. Graves sleep beneath fruit-laden boughs. Lilies and roses bloom over those who lied their signs that death does not end beauty, that every blossom is a promise. Dusk will come again, and with it the slow ascent to night. But this day is his offering, to kneel in soil and speak forgiveness with mulch and root, to unlearn the language of arming and learn the names of healing. In this chapter of silence, he becomes both gardener and rebel, planting seed not to overthrow, but to restore. He steps out of the cloister's calm, a seed packet, weight in pocket. The world beyond stretches long and gray, but he carries light. In green, a question hangs in the air as he passes through the gate. Can peace be grown, and will it root deep enough to endure? He steps into the pre-dawn hush before the abbey, where lanterns hang like captive stars, their flicker trembling across cold cobblestones. Silence presses against him, dense as mist in a hollow, yet alive with a stir of what must come. And that hush, he carries the weight of purpose, small enough to fit in the palm of a hand. Seed is the quiet echo of tomorrow. Beyond the cloister's embrace lies the greater world fields despoiled by war. Villages bowed by hunger, the Lord's hall, looming with demands. But here, in these enclosed grounds, he plots a different campaign, not of steel or siege, but of soil and patience. He moves through the hortus conclusus, each quadrilateral bed framed by low wattle fences or stone, an ordered map of hope and resilience. His hands brush against each planted row, onions and garlic for sustenance, fennel and cabbage for strength. These kitchen strands fed bodies near and far. Medicinal herbs line one bed, rosemary for remembrance, sage for harmony, rue for courage, living pharmacopoeia, born of soil and prayer. A fountain stands at the garth's heartits, murmuring water a liturgy, the bubbling, sparkling spout, the moving sheet. The silent pool, three states of water, as memory of the Trinity, reborn in stone and flow, dot around its cusp. Paths radiate, leading to life, life in leaf, root, and bloom. He cradles a handful of seed sweet grains, saved from looted fields, spared from hunger, now reclaimed as promise. In each kernel lies lineage, story, and fragile defiance. He presses them gently into dark furrows, the soil yielding beneath his fingers like a bomb. The act is rebellion, small, patient, rooted in earth by day's quiet light. The abbey garden becomes a living whisper of revival. Grass softens the cloister floor, a green balm for weary eyes that have stared too long into stone and flame. Beyond lie cemetery orchards, apple and pear trees growing above graves, their blossoms offering testimony that death may yield to renewal. That fruit may follow morning. Sister Hildegard, bearing tinctures and wisdom, approaches with a poultice of herbs, poppy for sleep, roses for pain, sage for fever, her craft echoing across centuries, binding body to spirit. Her presence reminds him this garden is not fiction, but lineage medicine grown from earth, spirit, and human hand. At twilight, he tends to seedlings planted with such solemn care. Each sapling quivers in lantern glow, a green vow against the encroaching dark. The wounded and the hungry wander in, drawn by the scent of root and bloom and the promise of healing. Beyond the walls, word begins to wend its way. There is medicine growing, bread rising, hope being sown. He feels the shift, not in ruin, but in rooted progress. In the way gentle labor may outlast a sword, he pauses at the fountain once more. Lantern light casting silver arcs over water and stone. The garden exhales in the hush. He places his hand above the flow, feeling the pulse of quiet resurgence. The chapter draws to a close, not with alarm, but with the soft assurance of seeds nestled in soil. The world beyond awaits, but inside him and inside the garden something green has taken hold. And as darkness falls beyond the cloister, he stands resolute, a silent general of growth, charged with tending what war could not destroy. Mist wakes the morning, as do pearls the leaves in delicate arcs of hope. The garden, cloistered, yet powerful, breathes beneath his hands, soft, resilient. Rows of onion and fennel stand tall, green spines, returning strength to hands once clenched. A round sword, but now coaxed into gentleness. He steps beyond the pale lattice of the cloister, and into the fields, stretching toward the village. The air carries scent of freshly turned furrows, of seedlings, pressing toward a sky still yawning in dawn's pale light. In his pouch lie seed-sweet kernels, like slumbering pledges, husks, heavy with stories and promise. With gentle intent, he presses them into earth among the scattered clods and root fibers, and with it, rebellion not born of blade but of bread. Each seed into soil is a whisper. The world can rise quietly from devastation. A woman carrying a child pauses, watching eyes meet. In that moment, he sees a reflection of what this effort may become, a nurturing, not of weapons, but of waking life. She smiles, a fissure of warmth in a world often spoken only in command. By midday, the abbey begins to pulse outward. Villagers come seeking herbs, chamomile for fever, mint for breath, sage for heart. They cup, transfer leaf into cloth, then into cupping hands each, a small contract, an exchange not of power, but of care. This is the gentle conquest, health granted, gratitude rooted, alliances born of shared need. The Lord's Hall still looms across the ridge, unyielding in its expectation, its demand. But now Outside its shadowed windows, there are gardens that grow. Hands that once obeyed command, now bend, not in fear, but to harvest. Seas that once lay stunned in sacks, now pulse with life under fingertips. As dusk unfurls its quiet dark, he returns to the garden's gateway. Lantern-like guilds, structured beds, each plant a sentinel of a future he cannot yet name. The path ahead remains long through burned fields, bowed cottages. Halls still occupied by old power, but inside him and inside the earth, something green is stirring. He places fingertips against cold stone, listening to the soft hum of root and whisper of leaf. In that moment, he understands the quiet rebellion is not over. It is awakening the world. He steps forward into the sleeping lane beyond the gardens, earth still beneath boot, seed still in pocket. Heart finally believing. Hope grows where tending begins. He steps into dawn that unfolds like a soft exhaler, new chapter in light, in soil, in the unassuming revolution he began with seed and soil. The garden's green promise now extends beyond cloistered stone, reaching outwards like quiet fingers. Through the mist, at the field's edge, the stir of life is subtle but true. Wheat pushes upward, trembling beneath dew. The edge of once charred earth now hums with renewed pulse. Villagers gather, drawn not by ritual, but by root. Mothers lean close to seedlings. A smith's apprentice inhales mint as though tasting mercy. They come to this place not for command, but for communion healing sprouted from the skin of the earth. Beyond the monastery's keep lies the grandeur, stretch of cultivated land, once governed by monastic order, worked by lay brothers or local laborers. Its fields, now tilled in tandem with villagers, speak of partnership, no longer of dominion. The grange, once a symbol of sacred separation, has become a bridge. Grain shared, labor united, survival woven into communal soil. In this moment, he sees what true power looks like. Not the clang of armor, but the convergence of hands, palm to palm, seed to soil. Not the echo of command, but the murmur of green life growing where preachers and peasants meet. He visits the grange at midday, when the sun stands steady and warm sheaves of grain tilt like trembling candles in the hush. He helps a village child press barley into sackcloth grain that will feed no solitary table, but many. Each kernel is chorus and covenant, a quiet anthem to restoration. As twilight descends, he retraces the path back through the cloister. Lanterns burn low, their light trembling across arched passages. But here, in the sanctuary, he closes his fingers around a handful of new grain. Each husk is a story, restless with promise. He steps out again, lantern in hand, into a world shaped not by siege, but by stewardship. What was once a line between sanctuary and soil has blurred into a map of hope rows, of seedlings that chart a future beyond fear. He walks toward the road that leads to home, not just his own, but all who lean toward healing. The fields behind him breathe with song. The world ahead awaits. Hope is rising, not in banners, but in blades of green, stretching skyward through soft earth. He steps into dawn that unfolds like a soft exhaler, new chapter in light, in soil, in the unassuming revolution he began with seed and soil. The garden's green promise now extends beyond cloistered stone, reaching outwards like quiet fingers. Through the mist, at the field's edge, the stir of life is subtle but true. Wheat pushes upward, trembling beneath dew. The edge of once charred earth now hums with renewed pulse. Villagers gather, drawn not by ritual, but by root. Mothers lean close to seedlings. A smith's apprentice inhales mint as though tasting mercy. They come to this place not for command, but for communion healing sprouted from the skin of the earth. Beyond the monastery's keep lies the grandeur, stretch of cultivated land, once governed by monastic order, worked by lay brothers or local laborers. Its fields, now till in tandem with villagers. Speak of partnership, no longer of dominion. The grange once, a symbol of sacred separation, has become a bridge. Grain shared, labor united, survival woven into communal soil. In this moment, he sees what true power looks like. Not the clang of armor, but the convergence of hands, palm to palm, seed to soil. Not the echo of command, but the murmur of green life growing where preachers and peasants meet. He visits the grange at midday, when the sun stands steady and warm sheaves of grain tilt like trembling candles in the hush. He helps a village child press barley into sackcloth grain that will feed no solitary table, but many. Each kernel is chorus and covenant, a quiet anthem to restoration. As twilight descends, he retraces the path back through the cloister. Lanterns burn low, their light trembling across arched passages. But here, in the sanctuary, he closes his fingers around a handful of new grain. Each husk is a story, restless with promise. He steps out again, lantern in hand, into a world shaped not by siege, but by stewardship. What was once a line between sanctuary and soil has blurred into a map of hope rolls, of seedlings that chart a future beyond fear. He walks toward the road that leads to home, not just his own, but all who lean toward healing. The fields behind him breathe with song. The world ahead awaits. Hope is rising, not in banners, but in blades of green, stretching skyward through soft earth. Mist drifts low across fields newly crowned by dawn. The garden beyond the cloister's edge breathes, lush and persistent as rows of grain and herb trembling in prayer to light. He stands at the outermost furrow, fingers pressed against earth, hollowed by seed and season. This is no longer the static sanctuary of stones, but a living tapestry, pulsing with root and leaf, knit by communities he never expected to nurture. Beyond the vibrant fringe, the village stirs. Hearth smoke curls from thatched roofs. Children chase glints of dew on green shoots. The baker shapes bread, flecked with fennel and rosemary, and the villagers pause in the lane to breathe in the scent of something tender and whole. Harvested comes not as spoil taken, but as communion offered. The Lord moves among fields, now guarded, not by guards or law, but by the quiet prosperity this land has borne. He greets the archer with a measured nod. No armor, no decree, the mutual acknowledgement of something restored. The soil has delivered more than grain. It has unearthed trust. He passes through the abbey's cloister at midday, torchlight replaced by sunlight that warms stone and stem alike. Sisters gather herbs. Novices press poultice into wounds softened by healing. The garden's geometry stands as testament. Once a secret of sanctuary, now a living plan for peace. Liturgy shaped by leaf and labor in the courtyard. Grain is shelled by many hands, villagers and monks, steward and smith, mother and child. Each kernel falls like a small benediction, bread that will feed bodies and hope that will feed hearts. The harvest is soft, but its echo is strong. This is the quiet conquest he envisioned, a world reborn, not in command, but in caring. He watches the steady movement. Grain passes into sacks, herbs into sachets, loaves into baskets. No flourish of victory, just the rhythm of labor, a flourish born in patience and shared purpose. The world beyond siege shapes itself anew, slower, unguarded, green dot as sun lowers toward horizon. He stands at the gate that frames both abbey and hall, seed in pocket and speech in heart. Across the fields, the furrows nestle under evening glow. Under lanterns, seedlings turn to shadows. No armies massed, no banners raised, just green life stitched into silence and soil. And then soft as breath, he whispers into dusk, may this harvest be not an end, but a beginning. The fields hold their breath, the lanterns flicker, seeds rest in waiting, and somewhere in that hush, the next quiet revolution quietly stirs, waiting only for the word, the touch, the small mercy that will coax green again into dark.